Some of these episodes that we're going to do every now and then are going to be a little bit different than what you see when myself and Bill LeMay go back and forth on hot takes in life. In this case, I wanted to be able to share with you other entrepreneurs, other leaders, other individuals' experiences in life. So hopefully you'll enjoy these, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Welcome to Hot Takes, brought to you by 50cupstea.com, where united we sip, discuss, and learn. Join us as we dive into the hottest takes on culture, business trends, and the threads that bind us. Get ready for inspiring stories, candid conversations, and a fresh perspective on living a healthy, fulfilled life. Grab your cup and tune in. Let's get started.
Welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Takes, sponsored by 50 Cups. Today we're going to do a little bit a different type of format. I have a good friend who's based in Denver, Colorado. His name is Bahman Shafa. He's an entrepreneur. He has a phenomenal story. So I don't want to give anything away, but I'm glad he could be here this morning. And Amman, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting me. Excited to be here. It's my first time ever having done a podcast, so this is all new to me.
Well, I got to tell you, you look pretty comfortable right now.
Thanks.
So I'm going to pour myself a little bit of some cold, not ice, but cold black tea today from 50 Cups. So whatever your drink of choice is, feel free to indulge during the day.
Great. Fantastic.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get to the States? How'd you get started? Talk about your childhood, the whole works.
Okay. Well, I was born in Iran, and my father was a doctor with the World Health Organization. And so he got transferred every 4 years to a different country. So my first 4 years were in Iran. And then we lived in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, and Gondar. And then we lived in Alexandria, Egypt. And then went to America for 1 year during the 1967 war. And then lived in Geneva, Switzerland for 5 years, which is where I went to high school. And then when I graduated from high school, I came to America for my college education. And my first 2 years were in Rhode Island. And then I transferred to Denver, Colorado to finish my undergraduate degree. And I went to Denver University and fell in love with Colorado and stayed and made that my home. So Denver, Colorado is home now, but I lived a little all over the world as a young child.
That's pretty impressive. How many languages can you speak?
I speak 4 languages. I speak Persian, English, French, and then Spanish.
So growing up, you've lived in, experienced different cultures, different countries. You obviously settle on making your life in the United States. What was it about the U.S. that made you decide to stay here as opposed to Switzerland or some of the other places you've been to?
Ever since I was 13 years old, I knew that I was going to be my own boss. And America was the land of opportunity where you create anything, make anything happen, anything was possible. And I don't know where and how that came from, but I had that decision in my mind that America was the land of opportunity. And so that's where I chose to come and pursue my college education. And it was true. I fell in love with Colorado. With the United States. It was made for me, you know? Mm-hmm. For people who want to push themselves to reach their ultimate potential in many respects, but especially in the business world, America is the land where there is no limit, and you can really unleash your creativity and your passions and your desires. And so I always knew that America was going to be where I was going to, start my business and live in. And it's absolutely true. sure how it really works that way. It really is true.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I moved every 2.5 to 3 years, but in the States, mostly up and down the Eastern Seaboard, because my father worked for IBM, and back then you just got transferred all the time. And so when I was in the northern climate and it snowed, we would shovel driveways and I would get paid. And I usually had my brother or a friend with me. And then if there was yard work that needed to be done, we'd go out and do the yard work and get paid. So from a young age, I also loved the fact that you could just work for yourself and get paid. And so I knew someday that I would also hopefully own my own company and be successful as well. So when you were 13, you knew you wanted to own your own company. Was there something that happened? Were you similar to me where you were just doing all these weird odd jobs all the time and getting paid for them? Like, how'd you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I'm not sure exactly what the tipping point was, but at some point in time, I realized that the most valuable thing I have is my life, and my life is translated into my time. And then I realized that when you work for someone, you're selling your time, which means that you're selling yourself. But I'm invaluable. I'm priceless. How can I put a price on myself? Like, how could I possibly put a price on my time? And at that point in time, at 13, I realized that my time is invaluable. I can't sell it. I'm not going to sell it. And that I would need to be my own boss. So I don't know where and how that came, but that's how it played out. Yeah.
While you're 13, then 16, 17, 18, obviously I'm sure you're taking jobs, you're working, et cetera. Talk a little bit about those jobs and what you learned from those jobs that helped you become a successful entrepreneur.
Well, a friend of mine in his family had this incredible chocolate sauce that they put over ice cream. So I learned the recipe for that sauce, and I made that sauce, and I tried to sell that sauce. And at school, I would put on barbecues, and grill hot dogs and hamburgers, and have these little parties and charge for the food. And I would just do all kinds of different little ventures like that. I would take batteries to school and sell them. I don't know how I did it. But and then in college, we had a huge snowstorm, and I had this idea of coming up with this bumper sticker. I survived, the blizzard of, I think it was 81 or something like that. And I made these bumper stickers, and I went around campus trying to sell them. And I did all kinds of funny, different things.
Did you sell any, by the way?
I sold some. It wasn't a home run, but it was.
That's funny. So you graduated college, and then did you go right into starting your own business, or did you go to the corporate world for a little while before you decided to do something?
I jumped into my own business. I had real estate in my blood, and I'm wondering where it came from. And I think it came from my mother, who was the business person in the family, or the financially savvy person in the family. And she's the one who decided that we were going to build our own home and live in our home as opposed to renting, which is what we've always done all our life. And so she took my hand and she took me to this piece of land in France, right across the border from Geneva, Switzerland. And she said, we're going to buy this land and we're going to build our home on it. And how important it is to own land and how important it is to own the roof over your head. And something happened, and it must have come from her, where I just had real estate in my blood, and I loved real estate. So I knew I was going to go in real estate. And when I graduated from university, I borrowed $25,000 from my father, and I went out and I bought a fourplex with owner carry financing. And I bought the tools and I bought the how-to books in terms of how to renovate the kitchen, how to renovate the bathroom. And I started renovating one apartment at a time, painting it, refinishing hardwood floors, new bathrooms, new countertops. And then did the whole building, increased the value, and then I refinanced it, and then I bought another one and another one. And I was young, I was cocky, I was very, very aggressive. And within 5 years, I had 150 apartments and 11 people working for me. Painters, cleaners, leasing agents, and accountants. But, you know, I'd never experienced a downturn. I'd never experienced a bump in the road. And so I would bet everything on the next deal. And I had no reserves. I had no cushion, no contingency plan. Because I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know that was a thing. I was just a young, cocky kid and just going for it. So of course I was very thinly capitalized, and it was basically a house of cards. All it took was one bump in the road and it all fell down. So in the mid 80s, we had a big recession in Colorado, and unemployment spiked, rents went down, vacancies went up, and I didn't have the reserves to withstand that shock. And so I lost all my properties. I lost everything I had. And I was $250,000 in debt. And I was like 28 years old. And so I learned a lot. And I remember the first 3 months, I was depressed. And I felt like a victim, like, woe is me. Here I am doing the right thing. And then totally out of my control, this recession happened. And I lost everything I had. It's not my fault. It's the recession's fault. Right. And then I very quickly realized that, my life was very precious and I wasn't going to spend it being depressed and unhappy. And I realized that my life wasn't contingent upon the circumstances in my life or about my financial standing, and that I was going to be happy, no matter what I had or didn't have. And so it was a very valuable lesson for me. And looking back, it was the best lesson. It was the best thing that could have ever happened for me. It was like my master's degree. Mm-hmm. And I learned what was important in life and what's not important in life, and what's meaningful and what's not meaningful. And I used to be pretentious and, drive around in the Benz and dress up all fancy. And I really cared about how I was perceived by others. And then after that, I just became a much more humble, authentic, genuine human being, and not pretentious. And so it was really a defining moment that changed who I was and my personality and my character, and made me a much better human being.
So I have to ask you, since you were in real estate, and you probably are now too, to some extent, I've seen two friends of mine in the last couple of years. One had a really big real estate company and COVID hit, and I don't think he's got to the point where you were, which is he still blames COVID and he doesn't blame anything that he did in the business. And as a result, he's defaulted on notes and he's in trouble at this point in time. And he had gone through the Great Recession in 2008 too. And it seems like the same behaviors have repeated themselves again now. And then there's another person on a much smaller scale who basically over leveraged to the 10th degree, and interest rates spiked, and he wasn't keeping an eye on some of his construction costs. And basically he robbed Paul to pay Peter, and now he's in trouble as well. So and these aren't kids. I mean, these are, 50, 60-year-old people. But can you just talk a little bit about the real estate mindset where that you were probably told by people, you're a very smart guy, you read history lessons in the past, there's always recessions, there's always economic downturns, whether they're 15, 20 years, or they're 5-year cycles, but they happen. But what goes through the mindset where you don't think it's ever going to happen to you?
I think the nature of being an entrepreneur, you're a positive thinker. You look at the glass half full, and you don't focus as much as maybe you should on the potential downsides and what the risks are. And you tend to use a lot of debt leverage because that's how you juice up your returns. And so it's easy to get in over your head. What I learned in the 81 recession, because I had a lot of land, a lot of development sites, and the value of those increased dramatically when it's boom times, but then they drop dramatically when there's no more demand for development. And so I realized that what was really important and valuable for sustainability was cash flow. And so I shifted my mindset away from speculation and from land into building cash flow producing assets. And so I started investing in self-storage. I started a self-storage brand. I invested more in parking lots, where I could generate cash flow. I already had some retail businesses, and I focused on my retail businesses. And I really built up my cash flow because I knew that that's what would allow me to sleep well at night and to be able to continue paying my obligations, in the case of a downturn. But it's a risky business, real estate, because sometimes even if you have great cash flow, but the market changes and the banks don't want to renew the loans with you, then you're in trouble. Like, for example, right now, if you own office, I don't care, how good your cash flow is. No bank wants to touch your office. And so your loan comes due, the bank wants to be paid off. You're in real trouble. You might have to sell distress just to pay off the debt. So a lot of different things can happen in real estate when you're dealing with banks and when you're dealing with debt. And the key is, can you handle whatever shock comes your way with regards to your debt? Because the debt is how your property can be taken from you. If you don't have debt, or if you have manageable debt, then you'll be able to hold that property forever. And if you can hold it forever, it'll eventually come back and you'll eventually come out okay. But if you can't hang on, if you can't hang in there, that's when you're going to get in trouble.
I think too, when times are good, banks are your friend.
Yeah.
And when times aren't good, banks aren't your friend anymore. But they unfortunately have the money and you don't. So how do you handle that banking relationship? Well, what did you learn from that experience?
To deal with more local regional banks as opposed to the large national banks. The large national banks, you're just a number, and they have their process, and they have their numbers and their criteria, and the equation, the formula comes out and says this. That's what they're going to ask you to do. Pay down the loan, pay off the loan, et cetera, et cetera. And they don't care about you as a human being, because there isn't that much of a relationship that's true. Whereas if you're dealing with a smaller, local, regional bank, where you have a true relationship, then there can be more of an understanding and more of a working together to come up with a solution. But a lot of times, the regional banks get bought up.
Right.
Next thing you know, you had this relationship, and then, for 10, 15, 20 years, and then they sell. And now you're dealing with a larger bank to which you don't have that exact same relationship. So it's interesting how over time, my interest and my intention is to pay down debt, is to get rid of debt. Because I just don't want the risk. And I don't need to push like I used to push before. I don't need to grow the way I used to want to grow before. Like, I'm happy with what I have, and I want to de-risk and de-leverage.
Mm-hmm. So after the real estate crash and you lose a lot, all of it probably, how did you get into the parking? How did you get into self-storage?
This is really fascinating. So I lost everything. And it was $250,000 of debt. And I had only $2,000 cash left. In one of the apartment buildings that I bought, down in the basement, I had rented it to a company that was a distributor for licensed sportswear. They would buy licensed sportswear from the manufacturers, and then they would distribute it to local mom and pops, like a gas station or a local convenience store. And it was like Denver Bronco t-shirts and sweatshirts and caps, Denver Gold, etc. And I actually invested in this company too. And they went bankrupt. They went belly up. And their inventory was in the basement of this building. And I was losing the building. So I had to get rid of this inventory. I had two choices. One was find someone to come in and buy everything wholesale, cut me a check and just take it all away. And then the other one was to sell it retail. Well, being the entrepreneur that I was, I took $600 and I bought a push cart. And I went on the 16th Street Mall in downtown Denver. And I put my t-shirts and sweatshirts on this push cart during lunch hours for 3 hours a day, every day. And someone would walk up to the push cart and I would pop up and I would say, hey, I have the lowest prices in town. $6.99 for a t-shirt, $9.99 for a sweatshirt. That's the extent of my knowledge in retail price. And so I started selling this inventory. Lucky for me, 1987, the Broncos were playing well. By Christmas, I had 4 push carts. And then the Broncos went to Super Bowl and all hell broke loose. Everyone goes crazy, loses their mind. I sell out of inventory within a matter of days. My local distributor that I'm now buying more product from, he runs out of inventory. And then 300 vendors pop up on street corners on tents selling Denver Broncos Super Bowl merchandise. And I realized that this is an industry, that you don't have to get lucky where your team makes it to the finals, that you can travel to a city whose team went to the finals and open up what today we call a pop-up store and do special event merchandising just for that event, selling all the merchandise for that event when people have lost their minds and the fans have gone crazy. And then you can close up shop and move on. And that you could do this for Final Fours, Super Bowls, World Series, NBA Finals. I mean, it just goes on and on. And so I hooked up with a local distributor. Again, very, very lucky. I was sitting on my push cart on the 16th Street Mall with my almost no merchandise, like I was empty. And some man walks up to me and says, do you want to buy Super Bowl Denver Bronco merchandise? And I look at him and I say, yes. He says, well, give me a call. He takes out a Motel 6 business card. Address in Thornton. He writes down his name and he writes down room number. And he gives me the card. He says, give me a call. And so I wait 1 day, I wait 2 days, and now I'm desperate. I call. What do I do? He says, well, come on up to the hotel. So I go up, and in the parking lot of this Motel 6 are these 2 tractor trailers full of boxes of product and guys picking and pulling. So they literally had a mobile warehouse in these tractor trailers out of a Motel 6 parking lot. He says, what do you want? So I said, okay, I'll take 100 of this. I'll take 50 of this. I order a bunch of stuff. He says, okay, come over and pay me. So we go to the hotel room, and on the bed, there's literally a mountain of cash on the bed. And that's when I realized that this is an industry where half of these vendors on street corners, they worked for him. They were like carnies, worked at carnivals. Mm-hmm. And so they got the product from him on consignment. They sold it, and then they came back and they paid him. And then he also wholesaled to local customers around town. And so he became my supplier. And I started going to World Series and Final Fours. And then eventually I started buying directly from manufacturers, not going through a distributor anymore. And And so I started traveling around the country doing special event merchandising and major sporting events. And my success really came from my background in real estate and my being able to identify great locations and knowing how to talk to landlords and how to convince them to rent to me for 2 weeks. Because back in those days, pop-up didn't exist. And so you really had to do a great job convincing the landlord to rent you the space for 2 weeks. And so I started opening superstores. I would go to malls or I would go to downtowns and rent vacant storefronts and open a superstore that would do the volume of 20 or 30 push carts. And that was my secret. I was the first one to do that. And I was very successful at identifying good locations where you open the door, the traffic's right there, they just walk right in.
Wow.
And you do huge volume, in 2 weeks, and then you pack up and then you go back home and set up again for the next event. And so that's how I generated cash flow with no cash to start off with and no credit. I had no credit. And the thing about this business was that you sold your inventory so fast. So if I invested $5,000 in the morning in inventory, by the evening that'd be $10,000 worth of cash. And then the next day I go buy $10,000 worth of inventory. By then, that could turn into $18,000 worth of cash. So I turn my capital daily. And that's how, with no cash and no credit, I was able to generate cash flow. And then I paid back my debts. And then I started buying commercial real estate again, in commercial this time, not residential. And I still had my retail business. I started acquiring good employees. I didn't want to lose them after the event. So I started opening permanent retail stores to keep my staff. So now I had permanent retail stores. I had my special event merchandising business. And then I started investing in real estate. But when I started investing in real estate again, I did it with owner carry financing because I still didn't have credit. So the owner would carry back the financing and I would put the down payment down, and I started buying real estate in and around downtown Denver. And by luck, again, how luck just comes your way, but you have to identify and realize that you're lucky and decide to take advantage of that operation. The property that I bought was behind what today is Coors Field. But I bought the property before Coors Field was built. Mm-hmm. So literally after it was built and they started playing games there, all of a sudden there's like thousands of people looking for parking. And I realized all this demand for parking around baseball stadiums. So I got a special event parking permit and I bought the land next door and I turned it was a half a city block. And I turned that into parking. And I sit there with my pouch and I, charge $10 for parking. And I got into the parking business and started buying parking lots. So now I had my retail stores and I started getting into the parking business. So just, if you just show up, opportunities are going to come your way. And it's up to you to identify them, to recognize them, and to decide, is this a good opportunity for me to pursue or not? And then you pursue it, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. And then one of the properties I bought happened to have a self-storage facility on it. And I inherited the self-storage facility. And I took it from 60% to 90% occupancy and realized the imbalance between supply and demand of self-storage in downtown Denver. And so I was going to tear down this property to build a hotel on it. But I didn't want to lose my customers. So I went and built another self-storage facility and moved my customers into there. And I started my Green Box self-storage brand, which is environmentally friendly, solar-powered self-storage. So I got into the self-storage business. And I started opening self-storage facilities. So it's like, you start with one thing and it leads to another and another opportunity and you leave there and you never know where it's going to take you.
Here's a hot take on some 50 Cups tea.
Green tea is known to have a variety of benefits as it contains polyphenols, which helps with lowering inflammation in the body. It also contains L-theanine, which is incredible for cognitive function and mood, and catechins, which support a healthy heart. Polyphenol antioxidants work in aiding weight loss, and The antioxidant properties in polyphenols also kill cancerous cells, stopping them from growing, which green tea has the potential to fight cancer.
Visit 50cupstea.com to find out more.
I think you're, having to move out all the whatever contents were in some of your buildings in the past. I've always believed that there's always a solution to everything, and whether God puts that in front of you or not, you had the ability to there was something that was there. I think most people just looked at that building and just cleaned it all out, dumped it, whatever you need to do, and then you figure out a way to pay the $250,000 back. And, you had the foresight to say, wow, look at this product here. I'm just going to go sell it because I need to get some money. And, one thing leads to another, to another, to another. Mm-hmm. And suddenly you're an opportunist and you see things that other people don't see. Yeah. So how do you get that gift? You born with it, or do you figure it out over time? Like, how does that work?
I think it's just the openness and the willingness to do different things, try different things. Like, I never dreamed that I'd be in the retail business. I never dreamed I'd be in the parking business, in the self-storage business. I never thought about that. But an opportunity came my way, and I was like, well, I'm open to it. I mean, how hard is it? How hard is it? You put your t-shirts on a hanger and you hang them. And you sell it, right? I mean, how hard can it be? So willingness to try, willingness to experiment, and a willingness to learn. Like, I don't know this business, but I'm gonna learn it, and just do what needs to be done, do what's in front of you. And in that day. Another story I want to share is that my father was a doctor, and he gave me a good life. He gave me a good education. He gave me everything. And when I was on a push cart, he came and visited me. He lived in California, and he started crying because in Iran, being a street vendor is the lowest form of livelihood.
So his tears aren't happy tears; they're sad tears.
Yeah, because here's a son that he gave a good education to, and now he's a street vendor, right? But it's interesting how it worked out because very quickly as my business grew, my father was retired, and I hired him to come work for me, and so he was my money man. He counted the money. He went to the bank. He got the change for the next day. And he worked for me for the next, part-time, for the next 15 years, and we'll work together. So, but his initial reaction was, oh my gosh, my son is the street vendor. Oh, what? I've failed. Yeah. So I didn't think about it. I didn't have an ego where I'm on the street, selling a push cart, and my ex-bankers are walking by me and they're saying hi. I just did what I had to do. Just do what you have to do. And not overthink it, not put your ego into it, and add meaning to it.
So I'm sure those 15 years where you work with your dad, that was a great experience. Share with that. What was that like?
It was fantastic because we got to spend time together. We traveled together. He came to all the events with me. He was part of the team. He had his set responsibilities, and so it was fantastic that we got to work together, and he got to, see the entrepreneurial side of his son and what it's like to own a business. And so it was fantastic. It all worked out.
That's great. So just curiosity, being a sports fan, what do you sell the most product? What's the most profitable, I should say? Is it Super Bowls? Is it Final Fours? Is it World Series? Is it World Cup?
It all depends on who the teams are. And you can either go to a host city that's hosting the event and open a store there, or you can go to the team city where the team is from and sell to the local fans, or you can do both. But it all depends on how hungry and how excited the fans are. Like I remember I have two stores I had one store in Chicago, and I opened a temporary store when the Cubs went to the World Series. And, they hadn't been in the World Series for over 100 years. And it was just bananas. So it depends on how, rabid the fans are and how long it's been and the quality of your location. But they're all good events. I've also done Democratic National Convention. I've done Republican National Conventions. I've done Sturgis Bike Fest. I've done Daytona, bike week. I've done all kinds of events all over the country and all over the world. I went to Paris for World Cup soccer, and I opened 2 stores on the Champs-Élysées, and then France won the World Cup that year, and I kept my store open for 2.5 years on the Champs-Élysées in Paris and turned it into a souvenir store. And so, yeah, I've been around the world. I've done Japan, Australia.
That's amazing. I was going to say, to your point, those teams that haven't been there forever, are probably going to do really well for you. And, if you're a team that's going every other year, it's not that big of a deal after a while.
Exactly, yeah.
So your company's Focus Corporation. And so what does it look like today? How big, how many employees, where are you located, all that good stuff?
I used to have more stores, but I've downsized my stores. So I have 4 stores now. I don't do special event merchandising anymore. And I'm primarily a real estate investment vehicle. And I have a portfolio of properties. And those properties also include self-storage, where I operate the business over and above owning the self-storage property, where I own and operate parking lots also, where I operate the business. I manage the parking lots. I own and operate a co-working business, enterprise co-working. So we have 2 facilities where, again, I own the real estate and I operate the business. So I don't just own the real estate, and I'm not just a landlord, but I'm also the tenant, quote unquote, the operator inside that real estate, which gives me the upside on the cash flow if I do a good job. If I'm a successful, profitable operator, then over and above making what I would have made otherwise in rent, I also make the profit and the upside of the business. So we have, I think, 65 employees right now between all the different businesses. And I'm not looking to grow right now. I'm just looking to maintain and operate what I have, be more profitable, be more efficient, and not create stress or worry or risk in my life. I want to simplify my life at this stage.
So eventually, when you quote unquote retire, are you looking to do a full exit, or are you looking to, transfer to employees or to family, et cetera?
That's a good question. I don't.
Haven't thought about it?
It's so hard because you get attached to these businesses, and it's so hard to let go. But I know that eventually I'm going to need to, I think, sell some of the more complicated businesses, and then maybe keep the easy ones that maybe one day my daughter will have an interest in managing as a landlord. Something so maybe not too difficult or too hard, and that she has an interest in, where with a good property manager, she can take on that continued management of the property. But if it's a really complicated business, then I'm going to have to exit that.
And I know your daughter's your pride and joy. You spoke very highly of her. And does she have any interest in getting into business with you?
She's 24, and she's passionate about her area of studies, international relations, international security, and she's pursuing that. But she's still young, and she has expressed an interest. And she knows the value of investing and having that passive income. And so she wants to learn more. And I'm hopeful that over time, as she matures and grows, she'll develop more and more of an interest, and that she'll she'll want to take on the management of some of these properties where I can continue to pass it on to her. Otherwise, I'm going to have to turn it all into cash and do something really easy with it.
So I know you love to travel, and obviously that's been in your blood since you've been born, I guess. Just give a typical year in the life of Bahman and where you go and how much time you take to travel each year.
Well, I travel a lot with my daughter. She's my travel buddy. I've been to 30 countries with her already.
Wow.
So, for example, when she went to university in Sydney, Australia, I went over there and I got her settled into her dorm. And then I spent time with her in Sydney. Then I was already halfway around the world. Then I went to Taiwan. I always wanted to go to Taiwan, and especially, I don't take anything for granted anymore. Like, I don't assume that things are going to stay the same forever. And one day China might invade Taiwan. So I want to see Taiwan, Before that happens, I went to Taiwan. Then I went to Thailand. I came back. And then I stayed home for 3 weeks. And then I went to Greece for my good friend's daughter's wedding. So I was in Greece for a week. And then I'm already in Europe. Well, I'm not chilling around to go home. So I went to Poland because I've never been to Poland before. And I spent a week in Poland. And then I went down to Slovakia, Bratislava, Vienna, Austria. Then I came back home. And then with my friend, I went to Marrakech for 10 days and Morocco. And then I came back for a month. And then I went with a friend to Kenya and Tanzania for 3 weeks, partly helping out farms and seeing how we can invest in their infrastructure in terms of solar and water. And then I came back, and then I met my daughter again. I came back for a month, and then I went and met my daughter again, and we did Malaysia, Indonesia together for 2.5 weeks. Then I come back for a month, and then travel again. So my next trip is going to be a biking and boating trip in Croatia. I'm excited about that. Organized tour. And then afterwards, I'm going to go to Turkey for 10 days. So I typically travel 2-3 weeks, come home for a month, travel 2-3 weeks, come home for a month. And I stay on top of my businesses even when I travel, typically 1 hour to 2 hours a day on the email.
And when you're traveling, do you have a certain way you travel? Most of those, you mentioned biking, are most of those active trips, or are you more of a sightseer, tourist? Like, how would you describe your travel strategy?
I'm a big foodie, so I do a lot of food tours. So I do biking tours and I do food tours, and that's how I meet a lot of locals and tour guides and decide where to go, what to do. And then on my own, I do a lot of things at home. I love to collect art. I love local arts and crafts. So I like to eat. So I walk, I bike, I do tours. I shop for arts and crafts. I meet people. I travel with friends. But yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I do these interviews, we always talk about, work-life balance and business and success and everything else. But, you really can't do any of that if you don't have your health. So walk me through your typical, exercise journey and, what you do to maintain, your body, so to speak, so you can be successful in everything else that you do.
Yeah. And that's what I love about my life in Denver, Colorado. When I'm home in Denver is that I have a routine, and I love my routine. I love Colorado. I do Pilates twice a week, and I stretch twice a week with a trainer. And then once a week, I go climbing, rock climbing, but in the gym. And then in the summertime, sometimes outdoors too. So once a week climbing, and then every weekend I go mountain biking with my friends. And so it's a standing Sunday morning mountain biking. And then on my own, I work out maybe 2 to 3 times a week at home.
And did you always do that, or like were you always consistent from your 20s on, or were you one of these guys that at 40 said, hey, I got to get better in better shape. And I became a workout guru.
I've always been sportive. I've always been active, but this particular routine, I think, has been maybe around 4 years now, where I've really gotten into stretching and Pilates and then mountain biking and rock climbing. So I love having that routine and that I have in Denver. The challenge is when I travel. And so what I've recently done is gotten those elastics.
And the bands? Yeah.
It's amazing how much you can exercise with those bands, you know, in your room, and sit-ups and push-ups, and then the gym in the hotel. But it's challenging when I travel. It's not as easy. I sometimes need that support of having an instructor for my Pilates, having my friends for the biking, my friends for the climbing, to support me in doing those things.
Yeah, those bands are pretty good because they're very light. You can put them in a carry-on and take them. And you have some type of an app, a Peloton app, for example, for me. I mean, you can just pop that thing on and get a good, 20 or 60-minute workout if you want. So, yeah, I think a lot of people, when they go on vacation, they say, oh, hey, I'm on vacation, I'm just going to rest. And that's fine to some extent. But, if you can just never get off that wagon, you can keep just doing it no matter where you are to do different things. I think that's always helpful for you.
It's so hard to start back up again once you've stopped for 2-3 weeks.
Absolutely. So I had this adage, discipline equals freedom. I didn't make that up. I stole that actually from Jocko Willink, who is a former Marine that does a lot of podcasts now. And what I like about it is the fact that if you're disciplined, then you have this freedom, and freedom in this case is to be able to make choices in your life. So if you travel, hopefully you can say, well, do I want to get on the bus with the tour group? Do I want to walk around the city by myself with somebody else? Do I want to go bike? Do I want to go hike? Do I want to, swim the river and, joking here, and then, swim ashore and go, walk through Croatia or whatever. So that's what I mean by choices. So from your perspective, what are some of the disciplines in your life that have enabled you to have these choices that, whether they're in business or whether they're, in life?
Discipline has been a challenge for me to make that a priority and to have it be overriding everything else in my life. So it's been challenging for me. I'm getting better and better and better at it, and I'm realizing that that what I do now is I write down. I have a list of what I do every single day, and I wake up and I literally check off that list. First thing I do, second thing I do, and try to do them first thing in the morning before my day starts. Because once my day starts, then I get caught up in emails and phone calls, and then things get in the way and you run out of time. So to try to get up earlier in the morning, have it written down where you can hold yourself accountable by looking at it and check them off first thing in the morning, get them out of the way, and then feel great because now you have the freedom for the rest of the day. You have the freedom of your time for the rest of the day. And I'm getting better and better at doing that. But it took time for me to get there. And then also realizing that I need support. So I need an instructor, or I need an appointment, make an appointment with a friend. And that's going to support me in maintaining my structure.
Well, I'll have to get some recommendations from you. Not that I'm in Denver, but from a stretch coach, because I'm about as flexible as a wall or a piece of board. So, and I hate doing it, and it's painful when I do it. So, but I know I got to get going on that. So fast forward, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? What are you doing?
I'm realizing that I'm at a different place in my life now, and I have different priorities now than I did 5, 10, 15 years ago. And so I'm being much more intentional about who I am and what I want to do and why I want to do it and how I want to spend my time. And it's not about, making more money. It's about exploring, learning, growing, adventure, meeting people, learning from people. sharing stories with people, hearing their stories, sharing my story. And then also looking at ways that I can give back and I can make an impact and influence in people's lives through sharing my lessons learned, but also potentially, helping people who really want and have a drive and a desire, but just didn't have the resources or didn't have the opportunities that I had, whether it's for education or whether it's, to start up a business of some kind. So yeah, it's about exploring, learning, growing, and helping.
You could do anything else in the world besides what you're doing now, what would that be?
I think I'm doing what I want to be doing. I think I'm living the life that I want to be doing. I still have enough business where I'm interested, but not too much to burden me or stress me or worry me. And I have a flexibility with my time to be able to choose what I want to do with my time. So I think I'd be doing exactly what I'm doing right now.
It's great. I thought maybe you might want to be a rock climbing Olympian. I mean, I watched that on the Olympics this summer. Those guys flew up. I mean, 3 or 4 seconds are going right to the top.
Yeah,
it was impressive.
When I was younger, I wanted to be a football star.
Oh well,
I'm very
I wanted to
happy
have hair too my whole life, so that didn't work out. So this being a hot take, the podcast, I'm just going to go through a couple of things with you and get your thoughts on some of the hot takes. So you travel a lot, and I assume you probably have pre-check and or clear or both. So I'll share my opinion on clear in Denver especially, but clear versus pre-check. What do you like?
I think clear is the more straightforward and way to go. Clear is way to go. Tell me, what do you think?
Well, I mean, as you know, I was in Colorado most of September, and I flew to Bozeman from Denver, and I also flew back home from Denver. And the whole TSA situation in Denver is crazy to begin with. It's a giant airport, and there's a billion people there. And so anyhow, going to Bozeman, my wife and I go over to Clear, and Clear's got 1 lane open. Pre-check's got about 16, and the Clear line is probably a 10-minute to get through, and pre-check's maybe a minute. So we went over to pre-check and went through. Next time we were going, which was last Friday, I think the entire country was in Colorado, and Clear was packed, and so was pre-check. But I used to like Clear a lot more, but in Denver at least, the $200 or $300, whatever it costs to go to Clear, is way more expensive than the $75 for pre-check. So I think I'm leaning more towards the pre-check these days. But Denver is a crazy airport. I don't know how you fly out of that all the time. So another one, you're probably in Colorado, so I maybe, I probably know where you're going to go on this, but gas cars versus electric cars.
Electric. I have a Tesla. I have a Tesla, and I love it. What a pleasure! What a joy! What a joy! And I get 250 miles on it, and there's just charging stations everywhere, and it's good to take a break, sometimes, and walk, stretch your legs, grab a coffee. But I love my electric cars so much. Oh my gosh!
Do you ever do the self-drive thing with it? No.
I truly enjoy driving it, and I love the fact that I'm not buying gas. And I've never ever had to go to the mechanic or do oil change or have anything go. It's so simple. It makes so much sense. I love my electric car, and I love the experience of driving it. And the pickup. Oh, what a joy when I need it. Wow, I got it.
Yeah. Seems like every time I ride in a Tesla with somebody, they want to show me how fast it goes in the first 5 seconds and my stomach goes to my head, then I feel like I'm going to throw up. But it does have some serious pickup.
Yeah.
Tea versus coffee.
I love tea. I drink tea almost every morning. And I also like chai, a spicy chai. That's my favorite go-to. When I go to a coffee shop, I order spicy chai.
E-bikes versus regular bikes.
E-bikes. I'm not as strong as I used to be, but I have some friends who are very, very, very strong. And in order for me to keep up with them, I need an electric bike. And I have no ego and I have no problem. The pleasure and the joy of being able to do hard rides and long rides in the Colorado mountains. And I can do that because of an e-bike. So it's worth it.
Excellent.
And I love it.
Yeah, I get a little fearful when I see some people on e-bikes that have those souped up e-bikes and they're, just flying down the road with cars behind them and everything else. And I'm just hopeful that they're going to be safe because it might give you a false sense, almost like they ride on like motorcycles sometimes. So I probably know the answer to this one as well, but cooking versus takeout.
Cooking, as long as I have the time. If I make the time, it's such a joy to cook, either by myself or with friends and family. But sometimes takeout is just so convenient and so practical. So, but when I have the time, when I make the time, cooking.
Books or audiobooks?
Audiobooks. Yeah, I it's hard for me to sit down in one place for a long time. So audio is typically the way to go.
Good, and I'll pass it back to you. I mean, any other hot takes you want to share?
Probably not hot takes. No.
Okay.
No.
All right. So we always try to end with a good story about life, the human race, because I think at the end of the day, we're all united. We all want good health. We all want to live good lives. We all want to help each other out. And so I have the utmost faith in the human race. So any stories you want to share around that?
I was thinking about that. And I think there's something else that I would like to share.
Sure.
In terms of lessons learned, and that had been transformative for me. And it's that everything happens for a reason. And in the moment, you might not see the reason. You might not see what the lesson learned is. But over time, when you look back, you'll see the lessons that you learned and how you grew from that experience and how you're better off from that experience. So everything happens for a reason and everything's always for the better. And then also, I've learned that everything in my life is an interpretation. So it's my interpretation of what's happening around me. When someone says something, I interpret it, and then I add meaning to it. If something happens, I interpret it and I add meaning to it. So basically, I create my reality through how I interpret everything that happens around me. Mm-hmm. So I'm 100% responsible for my reality, because I'm the one who created that interpretation. So I'm responsible for my life. I'm responsible for my happiness. So, taking responsibility is the most important thing in my life. And once I realized that, and once I started doing that, I became so much of a more happier person. And then also just acceptance, where you do, I do the best I can to have my life be a certain way. But at the end of the day, it is what it is, and life happens, and to accept it, as opposed to fighting it and letting it upset you or get you mad or angry. Yeah, accepting what is. You can still try to change things in the future, but not letting things get you upset or angry. So those are the really important things in life that I've learned that have really changed my happiness and my joy in life.
That's great stuff.
Yeah.
So if people want to follow you, where can they follow you? Are you just a private guy that stays below the radar, or
Yeah,
do you
I am.
no IGs or Twitters or anything like that? All right.
Just my close circle of friends.
Sounds great. Well, listen, I appreciate all your time today. It was a joy to hear your story, and you truly are one of the top 10 people, and thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for interviewing me. It's been a pleasure. It's been a
Thank you.
joy.
All right. Thanks for joining us on Hot Takes 50 Cups. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to visit our website at 50cupstea.com for more great content and delicious organic teas, and listen and watch us on all the leading platforms. Stay connected with us on Instagram at 50cupstea, YouTube, and TikTok. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends. Until next time, keep sipping and stay united.